First of all, it's great to be here. Thank you all for coming. I'm from New York. This is like, coming out here, it's like my peeps, because in New York, it's very rare to get a gathering like this, and here I just feel so at home. So, it's nice to meet you. And I'll be moving out here, just as a personal note, when my son graduates high school in 2017. I have the plan, so I'll be in the Bay Area. You look out for me. Just watch out. I'm Neal Goldsmith. I'm a psychologist from New York. I'm interested in policy research. My dissertation was on research utilization, how good research gathers dust on the shelf all too often. And after doing corporate work and internal research and technology transfer for a while, I started taking psychedelics again when I was about 40. And as you can imagine, it changes things. So my life completely changed over a period of time. My worldview changed, my clinical philosophy changed, and therefore my clinical practice changed, of course. So when I was starting out my career and I was a therapist, I was a Rogerian, so I would repeat back, honest reflection, back what people had said with a little bit of it. It was one of those annoying therapists, really, who just sort of repeats what you say. And, but now it's very different. Now I'm really very present. So that's just one example, and I'll talk more about that. I wrote a book called Psychedelic Healing, subtitled Entheogens, the Promise of Entheogens for Psychotherapy and Spiritual Development. Now usually, those two things, I guess maybe we think of those as related and overlapping, but lots of times in science they're not really thought of that way, sort of like two separate areas of nuts and bolts in science and sort of spirituality and gut stuff that's intuitive. And so, we'll talk a little bit about that duality. In fact, oops. No problem. Okay, so they're going to get back on. All right, so let me tell you why the term psycheology. When I first submitted the proposal here and they accepted it and they're very nice. And by the way, thanks to Maurizio and everybody here. They've been so nice to me and they've been very accommodating and all. So anyway, so they put it in the program, and the first version of the program online said psychology. And they said, oh, we thought it was a typo. But I made up that word, psycheology, because I realized that, the study of psychology, although it's now a pharmaceutical and a laboratory and a physiological kind of a study, is really based on the soul. And as I started, my own experience with psychedelics and began to see, illuminated really in a sense myself and others in the world around me, I began to realize that it wasn't so much changing or curing or fixing or certainly not medicalizing or surgery or things very mechanistic, but really that would make people feel better through therapy, through the process of therapy. It wasn't really analytical, although analysis is important to figure out, what your mommy did and what your daddy did. That's all very important for the therapist to know. But the actual, I don't want to say healing process, it's more like an alignment process, or a freeing process, or an opening process, rather than a fixing, changing. It's not change. In fact, the desire for change is part of the problem. Say what? Cleaning. Cleaning, no, because that implies you're dirty. It's a natural process, like a flower unfolds. So let me continue. So, as I realized that, I began to deal differently with my clients. I call them clients, not patients, because they're not sick. Okay, so why? We don't have our slides yet, but we will. So why psychology? Because psychology is really sort of founded on and should continue to be the study of the soul. And I spell soul with a small s because I don't want to make it a religious or supernatural concept. For me, soul is a convenient word. Unfortunately, it's overlapping with religion, and there's lots of bias and all, so perhaps we shouldn't use it, but it's a really good catch-all phrase for the deepest part of us. And if you're a physiologist, you can think of it in different ways, chemically or what have you, but it's the deepest, most profound part of us. And when we touch that, and to me, in my philosophy, that's perfect. And when we touch that and get aligned with that perfection, then everything sort of melts from the bottom up and realigns, like straightening your posture when you're sitting slouched. And you think, somebody says, oh, posture, and you say, oh, posture, wow. And you become aware of your posture like you weren't at first. So this illumination process that psychedelics help. So that's why psychology. I'll talk a little bit about psychedelic therapy, about the research on spiritual development, and some methodological and theoretical issues that remain. I want to talk about the psychology approach to psychotherapy, and then I'll give you some summaries and conclusions. So I'm going to speed on because I'm just sort of lollygagging here talking about these beautiful concepts, but let me stick to my presentation a bit more. So this duality that I was talking about before, oh, you know something? I'm sorry, I have a handout I'd like to just send down the way. Would you mind passing these down, please? And just give half to those guys too. Thank you. So the best way to think about this duality that I was talking about between the spiritual world, if you will, and the physical world, if you will, is what was happening in research psychology around the turn of the 1800s, the 19th century. No, I don't. That's fine. Thank you. Just give it to them and they'll pass it along, miss. Just give it to, leave the bunch and they'll pass it down. Thank you. So ran out, sorry. So who knows about William James, The Variety of Religious Experience? Okay, goodly number. Published in 1902. And it was really the first sort of scientific approach to spirituality and religion. But around the same time, a few years earlier, Wilhelm Wundt created the first experimental psychology lab. So this was the emergence from the soul, from the animistic, from the tribal, from the direct experience of the environment and the integration into it, into a more particularized, objectified, separate kind of approach. It's the Cartesian duality, where you separate soul or heart or spirit from the mechanistic world. Now, that's very effective. I mean, look around us. We have this wonderful facility and roads and machines and computers, my God. We've got so many things that we benefit from the mechanistic approach. But when it's not tied to or rooted in the original spiritual psyche approach, it becomes misguided. It becomes like a machine, just like a lawnmower out of control, just going down and mowing down everything, instead of being guided by in-touchedness with our truest self. So psychology, you know, psychology is not in the dictionary. I made the word up. And it's an awkward word. It doesn't flow off the tongue like psychology. It's psycheology. And it's good that way because you notice it. And that's why I use an awkward word, because I wanted people to remember, psyche, oh, what is the psyche? Ah, the psyche, right. Because I want the word itself to remind people of the concept. So, you know, psyche is an interesting word. Like in psychedelics, people translate the word psychedelic as psyche meaning mind, and delos like to manifest. And so it's mind manifesting. But the word psyche in Greek really doesn't mean mind, except in one limited sense. It means soul. It means essence. It's related to the word for breath. The word is pushke, and it's soul, spirit, mind, life, breath. So perfect. I mean, what a great word. And so we've taken it in psychology and made it into a clinical, you know, laboratory, you know, pharmaceutical study. But in reality, you know, even the word psychology is based in the word psyche. All right, so how did I get to this? I want to just tell you briefly about my own experience. So I took psychedelics as a kid. I'm 62, so I graduated college in 73, so I was right in that period. And I took psychedelics back then and had a good time doing it, but it was very intellectual. I would sit around with my buddies and we'd trade witticisms and stuff. It was very intellectual and like that. And I don't think I had really a profound spiritual and mystical experience from that period of time. And then I got into other things and jobs, and you know, I wondered if people were still taking psychedelics, because I wasn't, as the decades went by. And but you know, I just see a news report, you know, 600,000 tabs of acid seized. So I knew some people were taking acid stuff. And so when I got to be about 40, a relative of mine suggested that I take MDMA. This was in the 80s, the earlier mid-80s. And I did, and I had a remarkable experience. And it was a trip, you know, a beginning, a middle, and an end. And I just was so primed for this. I was about 40, and I was going through transitions, and so I went back to the dealer, and I said, what else do you have? He says, well, I have LSD, and this and that. I said, well, give me some of that LSD. And so I prepared for my trip. I put out my psychedelic record albums. Well, wait. So I was petrified because I was taking acid after like 20 years. And I was afraid, I wanted to see if I'd sold out, essentially, if I'd become an asshole. And, you know, with age and distance and whatnot. And, you know, the question was, well, what if the answer was yes? You have sold out. So I was petrified. I didn't know what to expect. And I had forgotten really what psychedelics were like, even though, I just had forgotten the personal experience of it. So I put little Post-it notes around the house with reassuring phrases like, it's only a drug, you'll be down soon, you're okay, things like that. Right? I was so scared. So, thinking like, if I was, oh my God, I'm so terrible, and I'd run into this note, oh, okay, right, and that would reassure me. So this is my protection. So, so I took a half of a blotter, thinking I'd, ease into it. And, I waited and I waited, and things, it sort of like, this is noticeable. It came up and it noticed, and then it went down. And I said, oh shit, after all these years, I've wasted my opportunity. I'm getting this weak, disco shit. I better take some more. And I took the second half. And then, of course, the first half came on in earnest because, psychedelics come on in waves. And the first wave, you don't feel after a bit, but then it comes on and you go into your roller coaster. So I said, oh shoot. After I'd taken the second half, I said, I'm in for a stronger experience than I had anticipated. Anyway, so I had this wonderful experience with my eyes closed. And this is, I'm telling you this not just as a sort of a trip report, but because it really changed my clinical practice and it influenced my whole worldview in terms of the psyche. So I had my eyes closed, and I had this vision of this beautiful field with purple flowers and mountains, and I was going down, down, down. See, for me, it's like psychedelics isn't about getting up high. It's about going to the roots, getting down. So I was going down under the ground. And as I got under the ground, I saw these like roots. They were like animal tails, but they were roots. I knew these were my psychological roots. And in my mind's eye, I said, great. I was still basically straight. I was just getting into the experience. I said, operant, I'll fix those roots. Fantastic. And so in my mind's eye, I zoom in close, like I'm going to fix them. I go, like this. Okay. And my roots went, and squealed and pulled away. And I knew what had happened, like I was too, picky, and I started feeling bad. I said, all right, later for you, I'll come back to that later. I didn't want to get into a bad circle. So I keep going down. And as I go down, I notice at the bottom, this beautiful, throbbing, glowing orb. And I knew that was the ground of my being. That was my soul. And so I went right down to it. And as I touched it, even to this moment, I feel that same experience. It was just, everything was okay. I released, I relaxed. It wasn't like I attained enlightenment or some truly transformative experience. I had a lot of work to do after this. But that one reconnection with my deepest self and the sense of okayedness, I hadn't felt anything like that probably in my whole life, or certainly in decades. So I was just transformed, and I came up in my mind's eye still with my eyes closed, and I saw those roots again. And this time I said, oh, okay, I get it, it's okay, don't worry, And my roots went, and opened up to me. So then I got up, I opened my eyes actually, and I started looking around, and I saw those Post-it notes. And I just felt such empathy for the person who had written them, because I really saw clearly what was going on. I had relaxed. It's like seeing clearly. It's not a matter of like figuring stuff out and gaining more. It's a matter of taking the static and the tension and releasing it. And so you can just see what's really there all the time anyway. It's like the tension, the knot in your psychological muscle is what, when it's released, then the vision. You see just clearly. So in any event, so I came up, and by the way, I didn't want to listen to any of that Jimi Hendrix, even though I love Jimi Hendrix. I wanted to listen to Bach, and I had a wonderful, rest of the day. It was a really remarkable experience. And then, I continued to take psychedelics thereafter, roughly monthly. I liked mushrooms, and that happened for a period of time. That was about 10 or 15. That was about 20 years ago by now. So what that said to me was that there's this core shell concept that I thought of, where the core was your deepest self, your truest self. And the shell was like the interface with the environment, and that's where the ego's job is, to interface, to categorize things and to gather things and win or compete and stuff like that. But that's just a tool of the true core self. But when we're babies and our parents are having at us, it's like, oh my God, the baby thinks, how can we be safe? That ego thing is really powerful. I'll go there. And I can figure things out, and I can analyze and hide behind it. And this stuff in the core that's not being honored and loved by my parents fully, the pain involved, I can bury that. So you bury your core, and you disidentify with your true self, your original self, and you identify instead with this aspect of your personality, and we cut off the deepest part. So we're not a full, now this is good stuff to have too, but it's got to be connected fully down to the core, and therefore guided and shaped or directed by the essence, by what we emit, who we really are. And when you cut that off, then this gets disconnected. So anyway, that's a strategy devised by a 2-year-old. I'm scared, what do? I'll become an ego. So, but it locks in, it's a perfect system. So the logic of it is hidden. And there's a buzzer, you know, like a trigger. And then there's this system. And the baby's not aware of it because the baby's not cognitively developed enough to be aware of it. It's built in, it's genetic. It's a defense mechanism, and it works beautifully. It's called personality. We choose one. So if parents are aggressive, maybe we'll fight back. If the parents are aggressive, maybe we'll get meek. If the parents are meek, maybe we'll, come on, grab them. If the parents are meek, maybe we'll back off. 4-way table, sort of, in a way. A 2-by-2 table. Anyway, so, you know, personality is a strategy devised by a 2-year-old. And so the task of adulthood is to wake up to what we did when we were a kid, what we had to do. Thank you so much, defense mechanism. You saved me. But now I'm an adult. I'm not 2 years old. I'm capable. I don't need to hide in some strategy. I can be present. But it's an automatic pilot system, so it takes some attention getting to see that, to recognize it, because the system's perfect. It's built to protect us. So this issue of integration, there we go. There we go. So I'm at the bottom of this slide now. Integration and reintegration. So integration, of the surface mind and the deepest self, so that it's all one whole thing, like a flower, that is a seed, sinks down roots, develops and grows over time with the proper conditions: sunshine, soil, water. That's it. Doesn't need to be directed. It just does it. It's pre-programmed, and it unfolds in this beautiful way when all the resources and environment is all right. And we're the same way, really. So parenting is like that. You don't want to be directing your child. You want to be more like a forest ranger than a farmer. Making sure if lightning strikes and there's fires, you go put it out. But other than that, you let the bramble grow beautifully and wholly and healthfully. So integration of those two things. The ego is great, but it's got to be grounded. And then reintegration is about after the trip. It's a whole different concept. But so what do? So you have this experience on the weekend, and it's magnificent. And then you go back to work and to the mortgage and the family and everything else, the job and the boss. And it used to be like, you go to a non-smoking seminar on the weekend, and then by the following Friday, you're smoking again because all your colleagues are smoking around, the water cooler. And so it's a similar sort of thing. So the idea of reintegration, it's the most important part of the psychedelic experience. As profound as the psychedelic experience can be, and as illuminating as it is, if you hide from it after a week or two, then not only is it a waste, it's actually worse because you're even more firmly defended against this thing that you saw, but now you don't want to see anymore. So it's very costly to put down a brick wall over something you've seen. And how can you not see what you've seen? Very costly to repress. So it's worse if you've seen it and then you can't implement it. So reintegration back into life is the most important thing. And but you can't. If you do have this mortgage and this boss and all this problem, what are you going to do about that? And even if you quit your job, you're still in a capitalist system. So then you can become a panhandler or something. That's not right. We have to come back bodhisattva-like and change society so that the environment that we come back into after our trip is conducive. And that's why the hippies went to communes, so they could have their own environment and not be, kind of sullied, if you will. But that's why we come back, and that's the ultimate thing, because when you take a psychedelic and you want to hold on to it, so you meditate. So psychedelics alone are just a brief illumination, and if you're lucky you remember it, it's great. And meditation, the other technique, is wonderful, but if you can lose yourself in a drone-like repetition of technique and method. And unenlightened teachers can just say, keep trying, do it a little differently this way. But if you have a psychedelic experience, then your meditation practice is illuminated and understood better and aerated, if you will, conceptually aerated. You see it more clearly, it's not as musty. And the two go together. because meditation without psychedelics is kind of blind, but psychedelics without meditation is rootless. So you can't have this change into a different configuration and then expect it to stay. It's like memory metal. It comes back to the old configuration. So when you're in the new configuration, you want to hold it long enough for the roots to go in, for the mortar to harden, to reharden in the bricks that you've now reconfigured of your home. Okay, how am I doing on timing? Okay. Okay, so I got about 10 more minutes. Let me plow through this a little bit faster. So this is research on spiritual development in terms of psychedelics. There's a vast literature. So I should ask, how many people here are, let's say, therapists? Can I ask? Healers or helpers of some sort? Okay, cool. And how many are familiar with the psychedelic, the research on spiritual development, the work? Not that familiar. Let me just give it briefly then. So first of all, there's some theory about the origins of religion, that the cave people, the foragers, would have naturally come across psychedelic plants and have taken them, and that some people speculate this is the origin of religion in the experience of a psychedelic plant. Now, Andy Letcher, who wrote the book Shroom, questions that. He says there's no evidence for that actually, really, and there is zero evidence. It's purely speculative. I recommend that book, Shroom.
What book is it?
Shroom, it's called. Terrible name, really. He's a enthusiast, but a complete empiricist. So if there's no evidence, forget it. He won't include it in what's allowable in his worldview. But ritual in tribal use, if you think about it, it's interesting because they have experience. They know this works or that doesn't work. Like, for example, they know that that lysergides can create a spontaneous abortion. It's a uterine dilator. That's why the discoverer of LSD, Albert Hofmann, was looking for medical applications of the lysergides. And there had been anecdotal evidence that these were uterine dilators, and so he was experimenting with it and came up with LSD. So tribal people don't give it to a pregnant woman. They've learned that over the millennia. So if you think about it, it's like research. It's like an experiment. Only instead of having your conditions simultaneous, so no dose, low dose, medium dose, high dose, different drug, different dose, etc., all done simultaneously. They do it sort of, chronologically. So they try something for 100 years, and they try, if it works or doesn't, and it becomes instantiated into ritual. And ritual is like methodology for us here. Our methodological guidelines are essentially ritual. Ritual instantiates what works. So as far as the research is concerned, people definitely report mystical experiences. And generally, they're sort of thought of as 4 different levels. The sort of sensory visual, colors and whatnot, the psychodynamic and historical, the sort of global or, I'm trying to think of the word, just, that which is holistic or gestalt about the earth, Gaia, the Gaia sort of approach to the universe and the earth. And then the 4th level is like white light, ego death. And those, you could slice it into 5 stages, I'm sure, if you wanted to, but that's as good as any. And those 4 stages go, if you think about it, over time. So it can be over the course of an evening. You can start with visual and then move into something more profound or go through your psychology. Or over time, as the months progress, as you become more familiar with psychedelics and relax into them, or even as you age over the decades, you can, you might have more profound experiences over time. Oz Janiger found that I think it was 24% of people had a spontaneous religious experience with LSD, with no religious iconography in the room, and then I think it was 87% had a religious experience when there was religious iconography in the room. So, but 24% had it even without, and it's religious. We call it religious. I spell religion with a small r. It's like they have a spiritual, a self-grounding, the profound experience. Pankey, did the famous Marsh Chapel study where he gave divinity students, and it was a controlled study. Half of them got psilocybin, and they all ranked it as one of the most profound experiences of their life. And now there's new research. Roland Griffiths at Johns Hopkins and others are looking at the use of psilocybin for end-of-life anxiety in cancer patients. And it's very, very effective. And what it really does is, in a sense, it's not a medicine. It's not like a penicillin, or it doesn't have its own operant effect. It releases, it changes, and then we see differently as the patient. And patient in this case, because they're cancer patients. But the doctor is different too. Because when the doctor is administering a mechanistic drug, it's going to have its effect. But when the doctor is facilitating the emergence of some spiritual experience or a grounding or a centering, then the doctor isn't really a doctor like we've been thinking of doctor. And medicine isn't medicine like we've been thinking of medicine. And science isn't science as we've been thinking of science. And therefore, the world is not the world as we've been thinking of the world. So it changes stuff. So it begs the question, is it real? Is it neurochemistry, or is it, soul? And that's, to me, that question reveals the answer. It's a spurious question because it's either or. And when I see duality, I smile, because duality is indicative of the ultimate unity, of the transcendence of the duality, of the integration. It's like dialectic. And so when somebody says, the Arabs and the Jews, or my wife and the husband, or any of these stupid dualities, the material and spiritual, it's ridiculous. There's one reality, one beautiful, blooming, buzzing reality, and the physicists are looking at it from this perspective and counting it in detail, and the spiritual people are looking at it from this thing and thinking of the whole and the connection, and it's the same thing. It's life. Here we are. It's one thing. So, we should broaden our worldview from the mechanistic worldview of medicine, mechanistically, pharmacologically, for example, to think about things like psychosomatics, spontaneous remission, placebo effect, stigmata research. Stigmata research, people start bleeding in the palms of their hands around Easter time, but archaeological evidence shows that people are crucified here, not here. And the reason they're crucified here, if they're crucified here, it just please excuse the grossness, but it just splits right through the finger, and they will fall. But if you crucify them here, it's held up by the wrist. So people were not crucified in the palm. So when the painters in the Middle Ages painted it, for some reason they did that instead. So people got the depiction of what crucifixion was like from looking at these paintings. And then they created blood here. It's not a visitation from God. God wouldn't make that mistake. Okay? So it's proof positive of the power of mind over body, mind over matter. And the integration, the less mechanistic and more holistic, more gestalt kind of way that the universe works, including us. I mentioned, am I on the wrong slide, I think? No, I mentioned the pair research down there, the Princeton Engineering Anomalies research, and Dean Radin is here. I highly recommend you see that work. They did things like computer simulations on random number generation that was influenced by focusing on it, and they found lots of significant research, including things like menstruating women and ovulating women have different effects on these computer random number generators. Groups have different effects than single people. Loving people in love have a different effect than people who are not. It's wonderful work. All right, so there's lots of issues remain. I'm not going to go into these. It's sort of psychedelic oriented specifically, but you can take a look, and I will send anybody the slides if you'd like it. But you can see there's some big issues about rescheduling and training, and the research is coming on strong. Johns Hopkins, UCLA, NYU, there's lots of locations. I refer you, for the people who are interested in the research, to look at MAPS, maps.org/research. MAPS is the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies. It's a really wonderful organization, and their research page lists all the research past, current, and planned. Alrighty, so the psychology approach to psychotherapy. As I've been pointing out to you, there's an issue of balance and integration. It's like if you have, if this is 12 o'clock and here's 2:30 and here's 10:30, it's in balance, And so everything's in balance. So you have a wife and a husband, let's just say. Or I said before, a parent and a child, where one's angry and one's meek or angry back. So there's this balancing thing. And so in our individual, it's the same thing. So let's say we're repressed as children, so now we're all meek and shy. But there's a balance. We can't just be meek and shy, it's imbalanced. So there has to be this sort of angry part somewhere too. Where is that? Down below the brick wall. But it's down there, it's in balance, because imbalanced systems are not stable. Um, I mentioned the seed with innate developmental stages and the unfolding of which leads to wisdom. Spirituality is not some big supernatural thing. It's just, you know, the most advanced stage of normal human development. And normal human development entails like fall, walk. You know, babies learning to walk fall all the time. Do you yell at them? No, you applaud. You're applauding their effort. Because you know that they'll fall, and eventually they will walk. It's the same thing with psychotherapy patients. You know, they come in and they, you know, are all upset. And, you know, I kind of smile because they're starting their journey. They come to me not here, but they come to me here when they're on their way back up. And I know, with some guidance and help, that they're going to be able to do that. So, you know, it's like, you know, failed relationship, successful relationship. It's the same thing. You don't want to... You see a flower blooming with these perfect conditions, and you're impatient, and there's this rosebud. You say, wouldn't that be lovely to be a flower? Let me take my tweezers and open up the petals. And of course, you kill it. So just, you know, Faith, the three-legged dog. Faith is a two-legged dog, sorry. I say three. Faith is a two-legged dog. She was born without her front legs. And they found her in some shelter, and they taught her to stand up on her hind legs. And she goes now to military bases and hospitals. Because why? Because you ever see a three-legged dog? Are they sad? Are they neurotic? No. They're playing, they're happy, they're natural. And so that's kind of the attitude we need to cultivate toward our own innate development. But you know something? The sapling and the kindly farmer. Let's say there's a sapling and a boulder rolls down the hill and goes onto the sapling and stops. And doesn't kill it, but it knocks it over, right? And so like 20 years later, you know, a kindly farmer walks by, and he sees this now tree that has a horizontal part, a boulder, and a vertical part, because it's bent to grow up to the sun. So he comes with his crowbar and he takes the boulder and gets it off. Now, does the tree go? Of course not. It's like that way. But it's got flowers, it's got seeds, it's fine. So it's the same way with us, and like with Faith, the two-legged dog. It's okay. It's the essential okayedness. And the essential okayedness is the release of the knot in the psychic muscle that occludes our vision. Like a tornado, you know? A tornado is just air, basically, right? But it's black, and you see it all twisted up. Now, if it could unfurl, it would just be atmosphere, transparent, essential, oxygen, but not in the way, not distracting. So our personalities, our neuroses, our triggers distract us. And we think this is an object, something out there. And we say, well, you're to this or you're to that. But it's really, where's it coming from? It's based on here. It goes down to here. So when you see it here, not up here, fixing it, changing it, when you see it down here and you release it, right, then this goes away. And what's left is just what's out there. Clear vision, people. How can I help you? What about you? No, I'm okay. How can I help you? I'm okay. Okay. I'm actually doing okay on time here. Alrighty. So, to sort of summarize then. The psycheology approach, the awkward word, is about the direct experience of the foundation of our true self. So as infants, we're all perfect. And love, perfect parenting, you know, that sort of non-dual thing, right in the center, is about a mature parent, a spiritually awake, you know, and spiritual is a weird word, it's just mature, awake, relaxed, loving person, being a parent. And then when the child does, you know, tests you in these different ways, you just understand what's going on, and you treat it with love, consistent love. Because love is what makes us, as infants, able to just be like that seed and unfold naturally. So if you don't have love, it's like a rock outcropping, and the seed has to go off to the side to get the sunlight. And it's like that sapling with the boulder on it. It's not formed properly, and it's less stable, of course. So when you have love, it's just shining like sunlight. Is the shining of love onto the individual. And so the fall walk, the baby falls when it's trying to walk, and it looks back at the parent. You know, am I okay? And the parent says, you're beautiful. And the baby says, okay. And then the exploratory, investigatory learning process has been reinforced. So love is the central issue of infancy, and then, of course, later on. Receiving unconditional love allows you to release and to relax, even as an adult, and to see the essential love at our root. So neurosis then, osis, I hate that word, neurosis. It rhymes with psychosis. It's a diagnosis. And it ain't that at all. You know, neurosis is the natural developmental process. Development is stage-wise, okay? So you go along relatively straight, and then you come across some challenge, some developmental challenge, and you beat your head against the wall for a while, and then through some miracle of integration, you find yourself up on the next level. And when you're on that next level and you look down, let's do it this way. If you're up here and you're looking down to that thing that was bothering you before, you say, oh, from this perspective, you say, oh, that's obvious. Because now you got it. You're reintegrated at a more complex level of intelligence. So you walk around for a little straight, and then you hit another barrier. You say, oh, I got this. This doesn't go on forever. This is not an endless wall. This is a stepwise development. So when you're hitting your head against the wall in that stepwise developmental process, you will inevitably eventually get to the next level, given proper sunshine, soil, and light. That's pathologized. Oh, you can't function. You're upset. You're anxious. Let's give you a pill. It stops you. And I worked at Sanctuary at Burning Man for a while, and it was an alternative to the medical tent where they would give you a shot and put you to sleep when you were having a difficult time. And so, but if you can have a safe container to let your difficult time go down, like Sanctuary at Burning Man, then you can recover and you say, yeah, you know, I remember what I was going through. I've learned a lot from this experience, instead of being like put to sleep. And it's sort of the same thing. Love enables us to relax and release. The desire for change is a reflection of the problem, not the solution. Oh, and there's this developmental dance. I had this transcendent experience, right? I told you about it, about going down to the ground of my being and seeing everything okay. But there was another experience about 18 months later at Burning Man. I won't go into great detail on it, but that was a cathartic experience. I was with some psychedelic therapists, a wonderful opportunity to have that experience myself at Burning Man, and that we started the session, and I said, well, I'll go down to the ground of my being, I'll be about 20 minutes, and I'll come back up and we'll start our session, because then I'll see everything's okay. And they looked at me like I said, what? They said, go there now. And I said, no, you don't understand. And I explained to them about the throbbing mound and all that stuff. And they said, go there now. And I won't go into detail, but I resisted for like a half an hour. And finally I said, all right, I'll go there now. I close my eyes, I wake up. I say, no, you have to understand, it's like a black hole with an event horizon. If you go down past the event, you're inevitably going to go into it. I can tell you, I've been there many times, about my mother and all this stuff. Go there now. So I went there now, and I experienced my mother thing with the pain that I haven't felt since I was 2, since I originally felt it. And that was transformative. So I realized that this dualistic dance of transcendence, which makes you feel love and safe and understanding, and then catharsis, which through the safety and the relaxation, you're enabled to go deeper. It's kind of like MDMA in a way. It takes the defenses away so you can go deeper down into the trauma. Well, a transcendent experience of love and bliss, be it MDMA or otherwise, will likewise enable you to go more deeply in the required, necessary second half of this dance, which is catharsis. Because you've got to go there. You can't just bliss out every week and think that you're going to melt your problems away without dealing with them. It's not like that. But they do work together. Anyway, so psychedelic therapy, of course, can be safe and effective when used as directed. And lastly, on this chart, there's ways to change policies and bureaucracies. And since we know how to do that, we're like honor bound to do it. So you need to be active, would be my admonition. This is the last slide. So the idea here is that psychology is a framework for a different kind of definition of healing. Like I said, spirituality is the advanced level of normal human development. The healing power of the whole organism is not supernatural. It's the way the body, it's the way physics works. And psychedelic medicine is mediated by this peak experience. The doctors aren't giving you like penicillin. It's something that if you have, the research shows that if you have a peak ego-death style experience in the research, that you'll be much more likely to lose your fear of death, to stop drinking alcohol, to have rapprochement with your family, or whatever the clinical effect is. The peak experience is kind of like is correlated with that effect coming out. But psychedelics are just a window. You know, Aldous Huxley said the doors of perception. But really it's more like a window, because you can't go through that door exactly. You can see it, but then when the trip goes away, you're back. So he called it a gratuitous grace. It's not earned or deserved. It's just it falls into your lap, really. And remember, of course, a spiritual experience is in a spiritual life. That takes a long time. You can give a spiritual experience to a, let's say, 8-year-old or something, and they might be enlightened for an hour, but would they really have become a be able to integrate that into their life without the humus and the loam and the detritus of experience for things to take root into? Like as if you gave a 70-year-old that same thing, they might actually have a more integrated experience. And it requires a daily practice like meditation. And we need to change society to complete our own development and those of everyone around us. So, we want to integrate the material view of this. We don't want to leave it behind, but the material view of drugs and pharmacology and the psychological view of healing, pathology, okay, but also the spiritual view that we are at essence incarnate energy, that we are patterned, precipitate energy out of the background field of which is best conceptualized as love. Any questions? Thank you very much.
Neal, do people go mad from taking LSD?
Do they do what from taking it?
Go crazy.
Good question. Generally speaking, no. However, psychedelics are powerful, and if you have a history of mental illness or a family history of mental illness, these are genetic components, so you're likely to have that as well. In essence, you're sort of in a way more fragile. And so a psychedelic experience can, in those very rare cases, small percentage of the population, cause a break, a psychotic break, which creates a scar, even in the best of us. So they don't make you go crazy in general. For the average person, when you screen out the population for people who have a family history of mental disorder, then they are safe and effective when used as directed. The crazy thing that we hear a lot about people freaking out and running to the hospital and that sort of stuff, has to do with resistance to the effect of the drug. It's not the effect of the drug to make you think all crazy stuff. The effect of the drug is to make you see yourself and to see clearly. That's the true effect. So if you're not ready to see clearly or to understand what's around you, if you're too invested in your systems or your neurosis or your personality, then you've got a big problem because you're seeing clearly, but you don't want to see clearly. So what do? You split. You have a psychotic break. And if you're a healthy, regular person and you have that experience, it'll last for a day. It'll last for a few hours, and then you'll have reverberations or bruising, essentially, for days or even a few weeks. But then you'll come back to equilibrium. But if you're one of those people who has the family history of mental disorder, then it may precipitate or trigger the onset of schizophrenia. And one piece of research said that the average age for onset of schizophrenia is 24, and with psychedelics, it's 22. So if you have this family history, so screening those people out, then no, it's not. It's safe and effective when used as directed. Miss.
Can you say more about if and how you see clients on entheogens?
Yes, I'm glad you asked that too. First of all, I don't do psychedelic therapy. And I'm not just saying it because the camera's on. It's actually true. I couldn't really be speaking and writing books about it. I wouldn't want to thumb my nose at the authorities and get busted and all that stuff. I'm kind of a wimp. So I don't do psychedelic therapy. But because of my book and because of my focus, lots of young people, especially who are interested in psychedelics, will come to see me. And these are people who are actively involved in exploring psychedelics for their personal development. And they want some guidance. They want to speak to a psychologist who doesn't, think of them as weird or crazy or who understands. And so when those people come to me, it's really great. I say, listen, if you're going to take, I'm not advising you, but if you're going to take psychedelics, take your psychedelic on a Wednesday and come see me on a Thursday. Or take it on a Thursday and come see me on a Friday. So there are people out there who will sit with you. Just be a sitter, not a therapist. And so that's for me the sort of ideal situation. And then the next session when they come in, I do hour-and-a-half sessions. We really, really get into it quite deeply. So, sir?
I was wondering if you could say a little more on, the daily practice. Integration requires daily practice.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think of when you think of daily practice? What do you suggest?
I'm realizing I was on the wrong slide. So this is some resources. There's my biography. A little bit about the book. I'll leave that up actually for you. Ask your question again, please.
Yeah, daily practice.
Yes,
What do you
thank you.
suggest? What are you thinking of?
Well, first of all, meditation. And meditation also has a lot of baggage. The word psychedelic has baggage and, whatever. So meditation, I tell my clients, don't meditate, please. It's too complicated, don't meditate. Just sit quietly, loosen your clothing, breathe, focus on your breath, and, I don't meditate though, because I don't want them to, people get nervous about meditation. So, but meditation to me, it's like the 1-2 punch. It's psychedelics and meditation go together. You have to have a spiritual practice to integrate, to instantiate, to give root to the insights and the not even insights, that's too individualistic or separate, like an idea of a separate thing, but your whole changed worldview. This released, relaxed, clarified, opened up, aligned, with your posture, all these metaphors I've used today, all of that stuff, that space doesn't stay because you get the press of your society, of your life, of your whatever, pressing you back into the old posture, to use that metaphor. So, you need something on a daily basis that's kind of like a mini psychedelic experience or a mini insight to help it take root. I'm getting the sorry. So thank you very much. I really appreciate your attention.